She whispered she didn't want to be a virgin, and the cowboy locked the door. It was a quiet evening in a small town far from the city's busy life. The streets were calm and a soft breeze carried the smell of earth and grass from nearby fields. She had been walking for a long time, tired from a day full of work. Life here was different. People knew each other, and there were no big crowds. She liked that sometimes, but tonight, the quiet made her feel even lonelier. She worked at a small cafe on the edge of town. Most days it was peaceful. The customers were friendly and she liked serving coffee and pastries. But inside, she carried a feeling that she could not shake. She felt left out sometimes, like she had fallen behind in life. People around her seemed to have experienced so much already. They had stories of adventure, love, and mistakes. She often felt like she had very little to share. That made her evenings, after work, feel heavy. That night, after finishing her shift, she decided to walk a little farther than usual. She liked watching the stars when she could, feeling that the world was bigger than her problems. She found herself walking toward the small bar at the corner of the town. It was not a fancy place, just a few tables, a counter, and some music playing softly in the background. People came here to talk, relax, and forget the day's struggles. She hesitated at the door for a moment. Normally, she would not enter a place like this alone, but tonight, she wanted to hear voices other than her own. She wanted to feel like she belonged somewhere, even if only for a short while. Slowly, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The warm air mixed with the smell of coffee and old wood felt comforting. A few people sat at the tables, talking quietly, laughing sometimes. There was a soft hum of music playing from an old jukebox in the corner. She walked to the counter and sat on a stool. The bartender smiled at her politely, and she smiled back. She asked for a cup of tea, nothing special, just something warm to hold in her hands. As she sipped, she watched the other people in the room. They seemed so confident, talking easily, sharing jokes. She felt a small pang in her heart. She wished she could be that comfortable too, but the words caught in her throat. Then she noticed him. He was sitting alone at a table in the corner. He looked older than most people here, but there was something calm about him. His clothes were simple, jeans, a worn shirt, and a hat resting on the table, but he carried himself with a quiet confidence. He seemed to notice everything around him but did not rush to be part of the crowd. There was a steadiness in the way he moved, a sense that he had lived a full life and had learned from it. She found herself looking at him more than she wanted to. There was something comforting in his presence, even though they had never met. He caught her staring once, and instead of looking away, he nodded slightly. Just a simple gesture of acknowledgement. She felt her cheeks warm. It was strange. She did not even know him. But something about that gesture made her feel less alone. After a few minutes, he stood up and came closer to the counter. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked, his voice calm and gentle. She shook her head, smiling a little. "Sure," she said. He sat on the stool next to hers. There was silence at first, a comfortable silence, not heavy or awkward. Sometimes when you meet the right person, silence does not feel uncomfortable. It feels safe. That's how it felt in that moment. They started talking. At first, it was small things. How long she had lived in the town, how the weather had been unusual lately, small stories about people in the cafe. His attention made her feel like someone truly wanted to listen to her. That feeling was rare. Most of the time, people only pretended to listen, their eyes wandering, their minds elsewhere. But not him. He was fully there, nodding at the right moments, asking gentle questions that made her think and smile. As the night went on, their conversation grew deeper. She talked about her life, the quiet loneliness she often felt, and the pressure she sometimes put on herself to grow faster than she could. He shared small stories from his life, about working on farms far from the town, about mistakes he had made, and lessons he had learned. There was no judgment in his voice, only understanding. He felt a small weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in a long while, she felt like someone could understand her without trying to change her. At one point, she whispered something she had never said aloud before. It was a fear she had carried for years, a personal insecurity about her lack of experience in certain parts of life. She barely said it, just a soft voice, almost swallowed by the music in the bar. Yet even in that whisper, she felt the trust she had never given to anyone. It was strange how quickly she had let herself share such a private thought. He nodded, listening carefully. He did not laugh, judge, or make her feel ashamed. He just acknowledged her words and continued talking gently. That simple acknowledgement made her heart beat a little faster, not with excitement, but with relief. She realized she could speak, and it would not break her. That was something new. Hours seemed to pass without notice. They talked about dreams, fears, hopes, and regrets. Each word drew them closer in understanding, not in romance, but in trust. She felt lighter, as if the burden of hiding her thoughts had been lifted just by sharing them. Sometimes, life gave you moments like this, rare moments where a stranger could make you feel seen. Tonight was one of those moments. Eventually, the bar began to empty. The music slowed, the lights dimmed, and the bartender started cleaning the counter. People waved goodbye to each other, leaving the two of them alone. She realized it was very late, much later than she had intended. She felt tired, but also strangely awake, as if sharing her thoughts had given her energy. He smiled at her, a kind smile that did not demand anything. "It's getting late. You should be careful walking home," he said softly. She nodded, grateful for his concern. There was something protective in the way he spoke, not controlling, just careful. She liked that. For a moment, they just sat in silence again, watching the empty bar. She felt a mix of emotions: comfort, curiosity, and a little fear of how strong the connection had become in such a short time. She realized that trust could be dangerous if given too quickly, yet also powerful if it was received with care. Finally, she stood up. She felt the weight of the night in her legs, but her heart was lighter. She had shared something she had never told anyone. She had been listened to without judgment. That night, she learned that sometimes even a stranger could help you feel less alone. As she walked to the door, she turned slightly and said, "Thank you for listening." His eyes met hers, steady and calm. "Any time," he said simply. And with that, she stepped out into the cool night air, feeling a small but important sense of hope. The stars above seemed brighter, the breeze felt fresher, and the quiet streets of the small town no longer felt so lonely. She knew life would not suddenly change, but tonight had given her something she had not realized she needed. A connection, even brief, that reminded her she was not invisible. And so, she walked home slowly, holding on to that feeling, not knowing that this night would mark the beginning of a story that would test her trust, her courage, and her understanding of human connection in ways she could never have imagined. The next morning, she woke up with the memory of last night still fresh in her mind. The conversation, the calm way he listened, the unexpected sense of safety she had felt. It all lingered like a soft, persistent echo. She made herself a cup of coffee and stared out the window at the quiet streets. The sun had risen slowly, painting the small town in shades of gold and orange. Life went on, as it always did, but she could not shake the thought of him, the stranger who had made her feel understood in a way no one else had. At work, she tried to focus, serving customers and cleaning tables, but her mind wandered. She replayed every detail of last night, the way he had nodded when she spoke, the calm tone of his voice, the small pauses that seemed to invite her to share more. It was strange to feel so drawn to someone she had only met for a few hours. She knew it was unusual, yet she could not help thinking about him. By midday, curiosity had taken root. She found herself wondering who he was, where he lived, and why he had taken the time to listen without judgment. The small town had a way of making everyone's life feel interconnected, but she knew almost nothing about him. She asked a few people who worked near the bar, casually inquiring if they knew the older man who sometimes visited at night. Most people shrugged, giving little information. "He keeps to himself," one person said. "Quiet, polite, never bothers anyone." That answer made her even more curious. Even as the day passed, she felt the pull of that night. The memory of feeling seen, even for a brief moment, was stronger than anything else she had felt in a long time. It was a reminder that the world was not completely indifferent, that even in quiet towns, unexpected connections could happen. She decided that if he was at the bar again that evening, she would try to talk to him. When evening came, she changed into clothes that made her feel comfortable yet presentable. She wanted to look approachable, but she did not want to pretend to be someone she was not. Walking to the bar, she rehearsed small topics she could bring up. Nothing personal at first, just light conversation. Her heart beat a little faster than usual. It was strange, this nervousness. She was not used to it, but it was a different kind of excitement. Not fear, just the awareness that something in her life was about to shift. The bar was quieter than usual. A few familiar faces sat scattered across the room. Music played softly, and the smell of coffee mixed with the faint aroma of baked goods. She scanned the room immediately and spotted him, sitting in his usual corner, quietly observing everything around him. Their eyes met, and he gave a small nod, the same quiet acknowledgement from the night before. That gesture made her feel welcomed, even in the middle of a room full of strangers. She approached and slid onto the stool next to him. "Hello," she said softly. He looked at her, a gentle smile forming. "Good evening," he replied. There was no awkwardness, no pressure, just a calm recognition of each other's presence. That simple greeting made her heart relax. She realized that sometimes connection was not about grand gestures, but about small, meaningful moments. They began talking again, carefully at first. He asked about her day, her work, and how she had spent her afternoon. She responded, noticing how easily the conversation flowed compared to her usual interactions. There was no judgment, no rush, just time taken to listen and respond thoughtfully. That patience made her feel valued, a feeling she rarely experienced in her daily life. As the night progressed, she felt comfortable enough to share a bit more about her personal struggles. She spoke of her loneliness, her insecurities, and the pressure she sometimes felt to keep up with the lives of others. He listened quietly, nodding when appropriate, and offered observations that were not intrusive but thoughtful. His words made her feel like her experiences were valid, like they mattered. At one point, she shared a fear she had carried for years, her worry that she was falling behind in life because she had not experienced certain things others seemed to have already done. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but he did not interrupt or react negatively. Instead, he acknowledged her feelings with calm, steady words. That simple act of listening without judgment created a strange but comforting bond between them. They laughed occasionally, sharing small stories and experiences from their lives. He told her about long days working on a ranch, dealing with unpredictable weather and difficult tasks, yet always finding moments of quiet satisfaction. She shared small stories from her life, moments that seemed trivial at first but took on new meaning when spoken aloud to someone who cared to listen. The room around them seemed to fade, leaving only their conversation and the connection that was growing between them. As the bar emptied once more, the atmosphere changed slightly. The music slowed, the lights dimmed, and the sense of isolation became more pronounced. Yet, in that quiet, she felt safe. There was no pressure, only the knowledge that she was being heard and understood. It was a rare feeling, one she realized she had been craving without knowing it. At one point, he looked at her and said, "It's good to talk with someone who wants to really listen. Not everyone gets that chance." She nodded, feeling the truth of his words resonate within her. "Yes," she whispered, "it's rare to feel like someone truly understands." For a brief moment, she felt like she could relax completely, as if a weight she had carried for years was lifted just by sharing her thoughts. The night continued, and they shared more stories, more quiet reflections on life and the lessons they had learned. She began to see that he had a perspective shaped by experience, patience, and observation. His presence was calming, not dominating, and she found herself thinking about his words long after he spoke them. It was a connection based on respect and understanding, something she had never expected to find in a stranger. Eventually, the bar closed for the night. He stood and placed a hand lightly on the back of the chair, a gesture of gentle attention rather than control. "You should be careful walking home," he said softly. She smiled, appreciating his concern. "I will," she replied. For a moment, neither spoke, just sharing a quiet understanding that had developed over the past hours. She walked home slowly, thinking about the night and the feelings it had stirred within her. There was curiosity, yes, but also a cautious awareness. She knew that trust had to be earned, and while she felt drawn to him, she also recognized the importance of patience. She remembered her own lessons about life, about choosing carefully whom to trust, and about the value of listening as much as speaking. That night, she lay in bed thinking about the conversations they had shared. The feeling of being heard, of being understood, was powerful. She realized that life often moved quickly, and people sometimes forgot to pay attention to the small but important moments. She made a mental note to cherish these experiences, to hold on to the feelings they evoked, and to continue growing from them. Even as she drifted off to sleep, the memory of the evening lingered. The quiet bar, the gentle conversation, and the presence of someone who truly listened gave her a sense of hope. It reminded her that connections could happen in the most unexpected places, and that even strangers could leave a lasting impact on her life. And so, she slept, holding on to that feeling of being understood, not knowing that her trust in that night would lead her to confront challenges and choices she had never imagined, shaping her life in ways both unexpected and profound. The next few days passed slowly for her. Work continued as usual, but her mind was never completely at peace. She kept thinking about the cowboy, the quiet man who had listened to her in a way no one else had. The memory of his calm voice and steady presence kept surfacing, often at the most unexpected moments, while pouring coffee, sweeping the floor, or walking down the quiet streets of the town. Her friends noticed a subtle change in her. She seemed quieter than usual, lost in thought, yet at the same time more attentive, more reflective. They asked if she was okay, and she gave them polite, vague answers. She did not feel ready to explain the depth of the connection she had felt with someone she barely knew. It was not a romance, at least not yet, but it was something equally powerful, a reminder that someone had genuinely seen her. Despite her careful attempts to focus on her life, the urge to see him again grew stronger. She found herself wandering near the bar in the evenings, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. Some nights he was there, other nights the bar was empty, and she left with a mix of disappointment and relief. There was a strange comfort in seeing him again, but she also began to feel a small unease, a question of what she should expect, how much she could trust, and whether she was allowing herself to become too attached too quickly. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the town in shades of pink and orange, she walked to the bar with a careful sense of anticipation. She opened the door and immediately saw him in his usual corner. He looked up and smiled softly, and her heart gave a small, unexpected jump. She felt both excitement and caution. There was a part of her that wanted to rush forward and talk, but another part reminded her to proceed slowly, to measure her feelings carefully. "Good evening," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. He nodded, returning the greeting with the same calm warmth that had drawn her in before. They sat together, and conversation began as naturally as it had on the first night. This time, however, there was a subtle shift. He seemed more curious about her life, asking questions that went deeper than before. "Have you ever felt like you were missing out on life?" he asked gently, his eyes meeting hers. She paused, considering how much to share. His question touched a nerve she had not explored in depth before. She nodded slowly. "Sometimes I feel like everyone else has already lived so much, and I'm just trying to catch up." Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but there was honesty in it. He listened carefully, not interrupting. "Life doesn't always move at the same speed for everyone," he said softly. "Some people find their path early, some later. It doesn't mean you're behind. It just means your journey is different." She felt a small comfort in his words, but at the same time, an undercurrent of tension grew. She realized that while his calm presence was reassuring, it also made her aware of her own vulnerability, how easily she could be influenced by someone she barely knew. As they talked, she shared more about her fears, her doubts, and the quiet loneliness she often carried. He listened with patience, but she began to notice a subtle change in her own feelings. She felt a mixture of trust and unease. His attention was comforting, yes, but it also made her aware of how dependent she was starting to feel on his presence for emotional support. That thought unsettled her. After a while, he suggested they step outside for a moment to feel the night air and watch the stars. She agreed, though a small voice in her mind warned her to be careful. Outside, the world was quiet and still, the streets empty except for the occasional distant sound of a car. The sky was clear and the stars sparkled like tiny lanterns above. They walked slowly along the empty street, talking in hushed tones. The calmness of the night made her feel safe, but it also amplified the tension in her chest. There was a sense of anticipation, a feeling that something significant was about to happen, though she could not put her finger on what. She realized that trust was a delicate thing, easy to give but hard to take back once shaken. At one point he stopped and turned to face her. "You've shared a lot with me," he said quietly. "I want to make sure you're comfortable. You don't have to say anything more if you don't want to." His words were careful, almost protective. She appreciated the gesture, yet she felt a swirl of conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to keep talking, to share everything she had felt for so long, but another part reminded her to be cautious, to protect herself emotionally. For a few moments, they stood in silence, the night air wrapping around them. The sounds of the town were distant, almost muted, as if the world had paused for this quiet encounter. She realized that she was learning an important lesson. Trust must be balanced with awareness. Even someone kind and patient could influence her feelings in ways she needed to understand carefully. Slowly she nodded and took a deep breath. "I trust you," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. He gave a small, reassuring smile, acknowledging her words without pressing further. That simple exchange created a mix of relief and tension within her. She felt understood, yet she also knew that trust carried responsibility. It was a delicate balance she needed to navigate carefully. They returned to the bar, where the last few customers were leaving. The bartender waved as they passed, and she smiled faintly. Sitting back at their table, she felt a quiet sense of closeness, but also a rising awareness of the boundaries she needed to maintain. Trust was powerful, but it was also fragile. She understood that fully now in a way she had never before. As the night wore on, they shared more stories, but the tone remained careful, respectful, and thoughtful. They spoke about past experiences, lessons learned, and the ways people sometimes misjudge each other. She found herself reflecting on her own life, thinking about moments she had rushed through or avoided because of fear. The conversation became not just a dialogue with him, but a dialogue with herself. When it was finally time to leave, she felt a mixture of gratitude, relief, and a small, lingering anxiety. She had learned a lot about herself in the past few hours, but she also realized that the calmness she had felt with him was not permanent. It was something to be appreciated, understood, and respected. She thanked him quietly, appreciating his presence, but also understanding that she needed to maintain her own emotional boundaries. Walking home under the starlit sky, she reflected on the lessons of the night. Trust was valuable, but it was also delicate. Sharing personal thoughts brought relief and connection, but it also required careful consideration. She realized that life often presented moments of both comfort and challenge, and it was how one responded to them that shaped their character. That night, she slept with a sense of quiet reflection. She understood that life's connections were sometimes fleeting, sometimes enduring, but always meaningful. She had experienced trust, curiosity, and emotional closeness, but she also understood the importance of caution, awareness, and personal responsibility. It was a night of growth, a night that would stay with her as she continued to navigate the complexities of life, trust, and human connection. The next few days after that evening were filled with a strange mix of anticipation and caution. She found herself replaying the conversations, the calmness, and the understanding he had shown. Every time she remembered the quiet moments under the starlit sky, she felt both comfort and unease. Comfort because someone had listened and seemed to understand her. Unease because she realized how much she had relied on that presence for emotional reassurance. At work, she tried to focus on her routine, but it was difficult. Every time she poured coffee or served a customer, her thoughts drifted back to the cowboy and the trust she had placed in him. She knew she needed to think clearly. Trust was valuable, but it was also delicate, and she had to be careful not to give it too quickly or blindly. She began to reflect on her own feelings and intentions, realizing that understanding herself was as important as understanding anyone else. Late one afternoon, she made a decision. She would go to the bar again that evening, but she would do so with her own boundaries in mind. She needed to test her ability to maintain control over her emotions and choices. She dressed in clothes that made her feel comfortable and confident. She walked with steady steps, reminding herself that her safety, her choices, and her feelings mattered most. When she arrived at the bar, the atmosphere was calm and familiar. The low hum of music, the smell of coffee, and the scattered chatter of a few patrons made the place feel welcoming. She spotted him sitting at his usual corner. He looked up and gave her a soft nod. She returned it, feeling a mix of warmth and alertness. There was trust in that small gesture, but also a reminder that she needed to remain aware of herself and her decisions. She approached him and sat down carefully. "Good evening," she said, her voice calm but steady. He returned the greeting with the same gentle warmth, that had drawn her in before. For a few minutes they spoke lightly, exchanging stories about their day, the small events that made life unpredictable, and shared observations about the town. The conversation was easy, familiar, but beneath it she felt the subtle undercurrent of her own awareness. After a while, he leaned slightly forward and asked, "Would you like to step outside for a moment? The night is calm, and the stars are visible." She hesitated for a brief moment, reminding herself of her own boundaries, and then nodded. She understood that she had the right to make decisions for herself, and that choosing to spend time outside was her choice, not an obligation. They stepped out together, the cool evening air wrapping around them. The streets were empty, and the quiet of the night made every sound seem amplified. The distant bark of a dog, the rustle of leaves in the wind, and the faint hum of life from houses nearby. The calm atmosphere gave her space to think clearly. She realized that while she felt a connection with him, it was essential to maintain her sense of self and her ability to make independent decisions. He began talking about life again, but this time she felt more grounded. She listened, nodded, and contributed her own reflections, noticing how her awareness had sharpened. She was not just reacting emotionally, she was engaging thoughtfully. For the first time, she felt a clear sense of agency in her interactions. She realized that trust and understanding were important, but they had to coexist with self-awareness and personal boundaries. As they walked, she decided to voice something that had been on her mind for days. "I appreciate your company," she said carefully, "but I need to make sure I'm clear about my own boundaries. I want to learn to trust people, but I also need to stay mindful of my own safety and feelings." Her words were steady, her voice confident, yet calm. He listened without interruption, nodding slowly. "That is very wise," he said. "Understanding yourself is just as important as understanding others. Trust is meaningful only when it respects both sides." His acknowledgement reinforced her growing confidence. She realized that this moment was not just about their conversation. It was about her learning to value her own judgment, her own sense of control, and her ability to make thoughtful choices. The night continued with their conversation flowing naturally, but now she felt more in control of her emotions. She shared stories about her life, her hopes, and her dreams, and he listened with respect, offering thoughtful insights rather than judgment. She began to see that genuine connection did not require losing oneself, but rather balancing openness with self-awareness. At one point, they reached a quiet corner of the street where the stars were brighter, the town lights distant. She paused, taking a deep breath. The moment felt significant, not because of him, but because of the clarity she had gained. She understood that her trust and attention were precious and needed careful consideration. This realization gave her a quiet sense of empowerment she had not felt before. "I've learned something important these past few days," she said softly. "I've realized that I can trust and still protect myself. I can connect with someone and still maintain my own boundaries. I can value others' presence without losing myself." She spoke these words not to him, but as a reminder to herself. The night seemed to hold her words gently, as if the stars themselves were listening. He nodded, his expression calm and thoughtful. "That is a very important lesson. Many people forget it. It takes courage to recognize your own limits and still allow yourself to connect." She felt a wave of affirmation and strength. This conversation had become more than just a dialogue. It was a turning point, a moment of personal growth. Eventually, the quiet of the night signaled that it was time to return to the bar. She walked beside him, but her steps were sure and self-assured. She realized that trust could be shared without losing her sense of independence. She also understood that human connection, while valuable, must always be balanced with self-awareness and respect for one's own boundaries. Back inside, the bar was nearly empty. They sat down briefly, sharing a few more stories and reflections. She noticed how different she felt compared to her first visits. Before, she had been drawn by comfort and the relief of being understood. Now, she was guided by clarity, self-awareness, and a sense of purpose. She understood that her interactions with him were meaningful, but they were also part of a larger lesson, learning to value herself as much as she valued connection. When it was time to leave, she stood, feeling confident and composed. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "I've learned a lot, not just about you, but about myself." His eyes met hers, and he smiled gently. "I'm glad. Remember, understanding yourself is a journey, and every experience teaches you something." Walking home, she felt a quiet strength in her steps. The streets were calm, the stars bright above, and she carried with her the knowledge that she could trust, connect, and still honor her own boundaries. She realized that life's lessons often came in small, subtle moments, and this night had given her one of the most important yet: the power of self-awareness and careful choice. She thought about the days ahead and understood that challenges would come, but she now had a new perspective. Trust could be extended, but it must never override one's own judgment. Connections could be meaningful, but they should never diminish personal strength. She felt a sense of readiness, a quiet confidence that she could face whatever came next with clarity and resilience. That night, as she lay down to sleep, she reflected on how much she had grown. She realized that life was not just about the connections we make, but also about the lessons those connections teach us. She had experienced trust, reflection, and awareness, and she knew that these moments would guide her choices in the days to come. And so, she drifted into sleep with a sense of calm determination. She understood that her journey was just beginning, and that every encounter, every conversation, and every reflection was shaping her into a stronger, wiser, and more self-aware person. She had learned to value herself, her boundaries, and her ability to navigate human connection with care and confidence, a lesson that would remain with her for a lifetime. The days that followed were different for her. There was a quiet sense of change in her life, a feeling that she had grown in ways she hadn't fully realized before. The lessons she had learned over the past nights, the conversations, the trust, and most importantly, the awareness of her own boundaries, had begun to settle into her mind like seeds taking root. She felt more confident, more reflective, and more capable of handling her emotions and relationships with care. Even her work at the cafe took on a new meaning. Tasks that once felt repetitive now had a rhythm, a sense of purpose. She noticed the small details: the way sunlight fell on the wooden counter, the smile of a regular customer, the quiet satisfaction of a perfectly brewed cup of coffee. Life still moved slowly, but she had found a new appreciation for its subtleties. Her focus was no longer just on her loneliness or her insecurities, but on what she could learn and how she could grow from every experience. Yet the cowboy remained on her mind. She wondered what he was thinking during these days when they did not see each other. She knew she had to maintain balance. She could not let curiosity turn into dependency, nor could she let admiration cloud her judgment. Every memory of him reminded her that trust was precious, but self-awareness was even more so. She realized that life was not just about the people we meet, but about how we allow those encounters to shape our understanding of ourselves. One evening, she decided to walk near the bar, not necessarily to see him, but to feel the calm and reflective energy that the place had brought her. The streets were quiet and the sky was clear, filled with stars that glimmered softly above the town. As she approached, she saw him sitting in his usual corner, quietly observing the room. He noticed her immediately and gave a small nod of recognition. She smiled in return, feeling a warmth, not of dependency, but of mutual respect and understanding. She approached him, and they greeted each other simply. "Good evening," she said. His calm smile reassured her that some things remained steady in life, even as other aspects shifted and grew. "Good evening," he replied. They sat together, and for a while silence enveloped them, comfortable and thoughtful. Sometimes words are not necessary to convey meaning. Sometimes presence alone is enough. As they talked that night, she shared more about her reflections since their first meetings. She spoke of the way she had learned to understand herself better, to recognize her own limits, and to value her own boundaries. She talked about how she had come to appreciate trust as something that must be given carefully, without losing one's own strength. He listened attentively, nodding occasionally, acknowledging the depth of her growth. "You've changed," he said quietly, with a calmness that did not judge, but simply observed. "There's a clarity in the way you speak now. It's different from before. It's stronger, yet thoughtful." She felt a small blush at his words, not from embarrassment, but from the realization that she had truly grown. This acknowledgement reinforced her belief that personal reflection and awareness were not just abstract concepts, they were practical tools that shaped her life and her interactions. Their conversation shifted to life's lessons more broadly. She spoke of how people often overlook the value of self-awareness, how many rush through life without understanding the impact of their choices or the importance of setting boundaries. He responded with stories of his own, times when he had learned to observe, to reflect, and to act carefully in relationships, whether with strangers, friends, or family. He found his experiences enlightening, not because they were extraordinary, but because they illustrated the importance of thoughtfulness and consideration in everyday life. At one point, she looked at him and said softly, "I understand now that connection is not just about comfort. It's about understanding, respect, and awareness. And it starts with knowing myself." He nodded, a quiet smile forming. "Exactly," he said. "When you know yourself, you can connect meaningfully without losing your own sense of direction. That is the key to every relationship, whether brief or long-lasting." As the night wore on, the bar emptied again, leaving only a few scattered patrons. She realized that these moments, small as they might seem, had given her lessons she would carry for life. She had learned to balance trust with caution, openness with awareness, and curiosity with careful judgment. These were skills she could take into every interaction, every relationship, every challenge she would face in the future. Eventually, they stepped outside and the cool night air wrapped around them. The streets were quiet, and the sky was bright with stars. She reflected on the journey of the past few days and weeks, the initial loneliness, the curiosity, the connection, the tension, and finally, the clarity. Life had presented her with a series of small yet powerful experiences, and she had learned from each one. "I feel stronger now," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not because of you, but because I've learned to see myself more clearly. I've learned to value my choices, my boundaries, and my ability to trust carefully." He looked at her, his expression calm but warm. "And that strength will carry you far. Life is unpredictable, but clarity like yours is a compass. It will guide you well." Walking back to the bar, she felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. The night had given her not just reflection, but affirmation, confirmation that she had grown, that she had learned valuable lessons about herself and the world around her. She realized that life's true treasures were often these subtle insights, the moments of understanding that quietly shaped character and perspective. Before leaving the bar entirely, she thanked him once more. "Thank you for these nights," she said, "for listening, for helping me see myself more clearly." He nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of her words, understanding that the true credit belonged to her own awareness and willingness to learn. "You've done the work yourself," he said. "I was just here to share the space and perspective. You found the lessons within yourself." Walking home, the streets felt different to her. They were no longer empty or lonely. She felt a sense of connection, not just with him, but with herself, with the lessons she had learned, and with the life she was slowly shaping through reflection and careful choices. She realized that true strength came from understanding oneself and from engaging with others thoughtfully and respectfully. That night she lay in bed thinking about how much had changed. The feelings of loneliness and doubt had not disappeared entirely, but they no longer controlled her. Instead, they served as reminders of growth, resilience, and the importance of self-awareness. She had faced her curiosity, tested her trust, and emerged more confident in her ability to navigate relationships, conversations, and emotions without losing herself. In the days that followed, she carried these lessons with her. She interacted with others more thoughtfully, listened more carefully, and valued her own boundaries as much as the boundaries of those around her. Life continued, with its small joys, challenges, and surprises, but she faced it with a sense of calm strength. She understood that every encounter, no matter how brief, had the potential to teach something meaningful. And so, the story reached its natural conclusion. She had learned to balance trust with awareness, connection with independence, and curiosity with careful reflection. The cowboy had been part of her journey, but the true growth belonged to her, the courage to observe, to reflect, and to make choices that honored her own values. Life, she realized, was a continuous journey of learning, connecting, and growing. Trust, understanding, and awareness were tools she would carry forward,